When I started working on this course, I asked the CG Dive community for feedback, and the number one difficulty that many people seem to share was weight painting. If you followed level 1 and level 2, you already have a very simple but highly effective recipe for weight painting, which will allow you to paint most characters. Let's say about 80%. In level 3, we are covering the remaining 20%. Take this seriously and you will never have weight painting issues again. A quick word about visibility settings. Personally, I will no longer use in front. If you want to use it, that's okay, but here is what I do. In pose mode, I can enable and disable X-ray to make my bones see-through or not. This is the same as pressing this button here. One drawback that this has is that it doesn't work the same way in edit mode for whatever reason. Here I cannot make my bones see-through. If I switch to solid shading, then I can use X-ray. I really don't like these Blender inconsistencies. But anyway, for the purpose of this character, what I want to do is weight painting. So I'll select the rig, shift select a mesh, and go to weight paint mode. And now the bones are basically in pose mode, so my X-ray workflow does work for this. This is the workflow I would recommend, but you are experienced enough. If there is another workflow that you like, then use it. So let's see what we are dealing with. We already applied automatic weights, but the mechanical arm does not move with the rig. That is a special problem that we are going to handle, but even if automatic weights did work, it would never be perfect on the mechanical arm. So we need to do special weight painting there. As for the rest of the body, it was weighted, but there are plenty of problems. This deformation of the hips. Similarly, deformation of the chest when I move the arm. And also, there are a bunch of places where the geometry is actually disconnected. For example, between the foot and pants. So you can see a gap in the character. And we have something similar here at the butt, the hand, and neck. Other than that, automatic weights gives us nice results, so I'm going to use it as a base. But we are going to work on all of these problem areas and also everything in between. Let's get into it. Now first I'm going to give you an interesting technique which we won't use at the end, but it can be useful, so let's explore it. It is called support bones. We can add additional bones in areas which are weighted incorrectly, and that can give us nicer results with just automatic weights. So I'll select this spine bone here, and let's isolate. I'll go to edit mode. I'll have the same bone selected now in edit mode, and I'll press Shift D and duplicate it. I'll name this bone DEF spine.R, and right-click and symmetrize it. Now, if I go to pose mode, the duplicated bones had a constraint, so they jump back to this position. So let's go to edit mode, select both of these bones, go to pose mode, and press Ctrl, Alt, and C. And that will remove the constraint. Now I'll shift-click this deformed bone. This is a technique I like. It's easier to select these bones in pose mode, but then I can go to edit mode and have the exact same bones selected and active. Now I can press Ctrl P and keep offset to parent these bones to the main spine bone. And I'll do the exact same thing here in this area. So what I'm trying to do is improve the bed deformations here and here that we saw while testing the rig. So same process, go to edit mode, and I'll have to isolate. I'll duplicate the DEF chest one bone, place it here, name it .R, symmetrize it, go to pose mode, remove the constraints, select both of these bones, shift select the middle one, go to edit mode, Ctrl P, keep offset. Okay, now with these additional support bones, I can select the character, shift select the rig, Ctrl P, and automatic weights to add those new bones to my deformation bones. Now in pose mode, if I move the arm, you'll see that the chest does not compress as before. And the hips also deform much better. But we still have these geometry disconnection issues, so we are going to have to weight paint anyway, and so the support bones will not save us that much work. In fact, when painting the body, they may make the process a little bit harder, because now we have to paint all of these additional bones. But this technique can be useful nonetheless, especially when you need to do something that doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be done quickly. So keep it in mind. Now I'll go to edit mode, delete the support bones, and update my weights by using automatic weights again. Okay, time for serious weight painting. Select your rig, shift select the body mesh, and go to weight paint mode. Go to tools, and let's set our settings as usual. Blend to add, weight to 1, strength to a low value. On the symmetry, this character is not symmetrical, so we are going to disable all of these options. Under options, enable auto normalize. Now under advanced, there is a setting called front faces only. And if it's enabled, disable it, because when it's enabled, it is more difficult to paint overlapping or occluded polygons such as what we have here and in the shoe area and so on. And by the way, disabling this option does not mean that you will be painting all the way through the mesh. So for example, if I enable this bone and paint a bit, there will be nothing on the backside. So I'll undo, and I'll go to fall off, and switch fall off shape to projected. Now if I paint, I'll be painting all the way through to the other side. So if you want to paint through the mesh, disable front faces only and enable projected. Now you have to be a little bit careful with painting through the mesh. It can behave a little bit unpredictably in perspective view, so I usually only use it in front and side view, and it's also very important to remember to switch back to sphere when you're done painting through the mesh. So I'll switch back to sphere and undo. And as in level 2, we're going to go to the weight paint overlays and switch 0 weights to active, so that we clearly see the 0 weights. And we'll also enable show weight contours. This will show these lines. I don't use them all the time, but it can be useful. For example, if I paint here, without the contours, this area here looks fully red. But if I enable contours, I can see that here it's actually close to red, but not quite red. So it's another indication of weights, and also the lines can tell us the smoothness of our painting. I'll undo here. So contours are not essential, I don't use it all the time, but let's practice with it. Okay, now we're just going to start at one end of the rig. It really doesn't matter which one, it can be the head or the arm, but I'll start from the feet and work my way up towards the arms and then the head. So let's start with his toe now. I'm going to remove some weights here, but it's mostly okay, and move to the foot. In the foot, you will almost always get this. The heel needs to be painted fully red. Otherwise, the heel will deform incorrectly. Okay, now we get to this gap that we get between the shoe and the pants. So here the problem is most likely that this bone has influence over this area. If the weights here were distributed only between the foot bone and the last twist bone, then we shouldn't see a gap. And by the way, there are other ways to fix this. For example, you can just fuse or merge the vertices so that the geometry is not disconnected. And that will fix the whole problem. But we want to practice here, so we are going to solve the more difficult problem. The first thing I'm going to do is activate this bone and control and click to erase any influence of this bone over this area. Then I'll activate the foot and paint some weights so that it also affects the pants. And that is basically it. The disconnection between the two parts will now be solved. We now just want to soften the transition. So I could activate the foot and smooth a bit. I'm shifting clicking here. And that's it, solved. I'm going to test the ball pivot, and it's looking good. So now I'll do the exact same process on the right foot. The character is not symmetrical, so we have to paint on both sides. Get over it. By the way, you have to be careful not to paint on the left foot while painting the right one, and vice versa. So here's what you could do. I'll go to edit mode, for the mesh, enable X-ray, and with circle selection, I'll select this leg. Then back to weight paint mode, I can enable this toggle here, which limits the area I can paint only to the selected vertices. So even if I click here on the left foot, I won't be able to add any weights. The slight problem with this is that when I want to select another bone, I need to disable the toggle and then select the bone and then enable it again. The shortcut is 2, so I'm going to use that. So I'll select this bone, 2 to enable the vertex selection and paint. Then 2 to disable and select this bone. I'll paint the heel nicely. And then paint some weights on the pants. Disable vertex selection, select this bone and remove any weights from the bottom of the pants. Then select the foot again, vertex selection, and smooth this transition with shift and clicking. It looks okay. Here I can see some clipping, so let's try to fix it. I'll enable the foot, press 2, and click lightly, and it's fixed. So you should test carefully, and if you notice any clipping, just go back to weight painting and add, subtract, or smooth the weights. Now we'll go further up, and the twisting of the legs is perfect. There's really nothing I want to tweak here. But if I select the main torso control and move it down, the knees will most likely need some work. They're not too bad, but let's try to work on them a bit. Now here is a technique you can use while weight painting. I'll go to object mode, select only my rig, go to pose mode, reset the rig, and then I'll press I to keyframe the torso. Then go to frame 10 or 15 or so and move the torso down. And press I to add a keyframe. Okay, now back to weight paint mode. I can now change the pose like this, or even better, in the viewport, hold Alt and scroll the mouse wheel, and you can go back and forth in your animation. Now I'll activate this bone, I'll press 2 to activate the vertices and Control I to invert the selection so that I can focus on this leg. And now let's see what happens if I add some weights in the knee area. This actually gets worse, so I'll undo. And I'll move to the next bone and paint some weights. And then smooth a bit. So this will not make a huge difference, but it can restore some volume in the knees. Let's do the same on the other side. Okay, and the other issue is the intersection between the upper leg and the lower leg. So here with this pose, I'm going to shift and click lightly and that will improve things a little bit. Now, some intersection is inevitable here, unless we add more bones and automate them and so on, but I think this is quite acceptable. As I said earlier, I prefer hard weights that overlap a little bit compared to soft weights which may look too wishy-washy. So if you keep smoothing here, you may get very soft deformations which may not look good. I'll do some smoothing on the other side. And that will be all for the knees. Next, we'll focus on this area between the pants and the upper body. This is probably the toughest area in this character. It's going to be good practice and we'll learn some new techniques. I'll disable vertex selection. And now, one of the things we want to avoid is messing up areas that we already worked on and we are happy with. For example, if I select this bone and by accident paint on the foot, that won't be nice. We already learned about vertex selection, but there is another way to prevent changes to existing weights, and that is to lock the weights. If I Alt and click on the foot here, I can go to the vertex groups and click this lock icon. The bone will become red and I won't be able to change these weights anymore. I don't want to click here to test it because there are still many unlocked bones. So let's do this. I'll Alt click on this bone and then Alt Shift and click on other bones in this area. I want to select all bones all the way up to the knee where we worked on. And with all of these bones selected, I can go to Weights, Locks, Lock Selected. That is a convenient way to enable the locks on multiple bones. Now I can click here all I want, but I won't be able to change these weights. This will make sure that our existing weights will not be changed. And for extra layer of security, you can go to Edit Mode, or in current versions of Blender, you don't even have to go to Edit Mode. You can use Box Select, Enable Selection, and just drag a selection here. And this will be the area we'll be working on. Now I'll create another quick animation to help me assess this area and to make sure that the tweaks I'm making are done in the context of actual deformations. So let's go to Object Mode, select the rig, go to Pose Mode, select everything, and then select the existing keyframes and delete them. Now I'm in IK mode for these legs, and I have X symmetry enabled. I'll select both IK controls, and at frame 1, press I to insert the keyframe, then go to frame 10, and let's enable auto keying here. Now I can just pose one leg, and the other will be moved and also animated automatically. So I'll create a pose like this. This will expose important deformation problems. Then I'll go to frame 20 and I'll create something like a full split. So we are creating some extreme poses that will help us troubleshoot this rig. Then on frame 30, I'll create this pose similar to the previous one. And then on frame 50, I'll move both legs all the way back like this. And on frame 40, I'll place the legs in their default state. And now I have this test animation. Let's go to weight paint mode. And I'll switch to my brush. Now I want to activate this bone, and there are weights that I can tweak without even testing my animation. I know that this leg doesn't need to affect this area here. So I'll control click, and I'll increase the strength and just remove a lot of these weights. Also, it doesn't need to affect the opposite leg. So I'll do something like this for now, and same on the other side. And also, I'm going to want this area here to be affected only by the first spine bone and the first leg twist bones, and nothing else. So if I select this bone here, for example, I can see that it has some influence over this area, so I'll get rid of it. A lot of these disconnecting issues that we have here are because multiple bones are fighting for influence over the area. So we'll try to simplify it as much as possible and just leave it to these 3 bones. Same on the other side. This bone seems fine. And now let's select the second spine bone. And I also want to remove any influence in this area. Okay, now I can start going through the animation and checking for problems. Let's disable auto keying. And let's see what we have here. So this bone is still affecting too much of the hips. So I'm going to control click in this area. And I'll go back so that I have access to the area that I want to tweak. I can shift and click a bit to smooth the weights. Let's do the same here. I mostly just want to shift and click to smooth the weights. Now in this state, you're very likely to see some volume loss in here, in this area. So with low strength, I'm going to click in this area to restore some of this volume, and then shift and click a bit. Automatic weights already did a lot of the work for us. What we are doing is very slight and subtle. Here, I probably want to click in this area for the first spine bone. Basically, I wanted to control the middle of the crotch quite strongly, but I'll also shift and click a bit to smooth. Okay, this is looking good. Let's go to the split. And this is also not too bad. I probably want to remove more weights from the hips for this twist bone. So control and click and then shift and click a bit. Okay, and this is starting to look good. Again, I'm following my rule that hard weights and slightly overlapping geometry is better than too soft geometry. So if I shift click here, it will create very soft transition, which I don't like. So I'll undo. Let's go to the next pose. And here we see an important problem on the back of the character. I believe the legs are affecting too much of this area. So with the spine bone selected, pain positive weights here. And let's move a bit. When you make any changes, go back to the previous poses and check how the newly painted weights affect the previous pose. Here I may want to add very light weights for the leg. And same on the other side. Now, if we check the final pose, I find that we need a little bit more volume in the butt of the character. So I'll paint some positive weights for the legs, very lightly. In the front, I'll paint some positive weights for the spine bone, to straighten the jacket. Here it seems I painted weights in this area, which I didn't want to, so let's just paint it out. If you notice any spikes, you can try to shift and click to smooth the weights. Now the main issue is again at the back. I'll make my brush big and my strength very low and click in this area. I'll switch to another light probe to see better. Now I'm removing a little bit of weights for the spine. It's just a lot of back and forth. Smoothing a bit. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'll go to edit mode and select only the jacket, and then in weight paint mode, enable vertex selection and paint lightly to straighten the jacket. Then I'll go again to edit mode and Control I to invert the selection. And now I'll work only on the pants. And I'll make sure that they fuse with the jacket. Now going through all of the poses, it is starting to look quite good to me. Maybe I just want to restore some of the leg volume here. So I'll select this leg bone and click lightly. And I'll call this area done. Let's go to object mode, select the rig, pose mode, select all bones, and delete all keyframes. The upper body was painted nicely with automatic weights, so we don't have to do a lot of work. What I'll try now is to select the chest control and from the side view bend it down. And I believe the weights are a little bit too soft here. There is a rib cage in this area and it should feel a little bit harder. So let's go to weight paint and select this bone. And now I see that its influence goes way too much down into the pelvis area. So let's paint it out a bit. And also select this bone. And it seems to also be affecting all the way down to the end of the jacket. So I'll paint it out. It really has no business affecting this area. Okay, now select the first chest bone and paint some positive weights here in the chest area. And let's paint in the deformed state to see what we are doing. And so I'm bringing more of the volume of the rib cage. I may want to paint on the sides as well, so that when I rotate this control sideways, again, the rib cage would keep its volume. And this spine bone should probably affect more of the hips here. So we're getting a bit of a hard transition here between the hips, where there is some bone, and the chest, where we also have some bones. Now we have the deformation of the chest, and this is mainly because some of the twist bones are affecting the body. So all we need to do is paint out this influence from the twist bones over the body, and it will be fixed. I'll tweak the first twist bone now has to affect only the arm and nothing else. Then the next twist bone. And maybe even the third one. The rest will not reach that far. And that basically fixes the chest. I can paint some positive weights here at the transition and smooth a bit. Okay, we will come back to the shoulder and neck area, which will also be a little bit difficult. But first, let's take care of the wrist, because it disconnects quite a lot, but it will be easy to fix. I'll go to my rig pose mode, settings, go to item, and I want to switch my arm to FK. I left the value to 0.86, which is almost IK, but the arm will also be affected a little bit by the FK. So this is just a reminder to be careful and always use either full 1 or 0 values. So let's switch to FK because I think it will be a little bit easier to test. And let's work on the wrist. Go to weight paint mode. And again, I don't want too many bones to fight for the influence over this area. I only want the last twist bone and the hand to affect it. So for this bone, I'll remove all influence. And let's see the next one. It's fine. But the palm bones probably affect this area, so let's paint it out. Okay, now let's fix the wrist. I'll create a little test animation. Go to my rig pose mode. Set a keyframe at frame 0. Then on frame 10, I'll bring the arm down and insert a keyframe. Really, the problem is with the down and up movement. The twisting is actually fine. So let's focus on up and down. Frame 20, I'll bring back to the default position. I to keyframe and 30 and bring the arm up and keyframe. Let's go to weight paint. So we can fix this as usual by just clicking, adding, removing, and smoothing weights, but I found a very efficient workflow. I'll go to Tool, and I'll switch Blend to Mix, which is the default. Mix and Add work almost the same in most situations. What I don't like about Mix is that if I try to control click here, I get to this very low weights, probably 0.001, which I simply cannot remove by controlling clicking. Whereas if I use Add, they will be removed. So that's the main reason we are using Add. But when I switch to Mix, I can set my weight to 0.5 and strength all the way to 1. And this will actually paint exactly a weight of 0.5. So with this setting, I'm going to paint in this transition area between the hand and the jacket. Okay, I'll paint until it turns fully green. And then I'll switch to the twist bone and do the same. We could probably switch to projected here and just paint through. That should be quite efficient. I can even increase the strength to 2. That should make it faster to paint this area. So let's switch back to sphere and strength to 1. Okay, and this should be good. Now let's go through the animation, and the geometry stays connected. Now what I don't like is that I'm losing some of the volume of the hand. So let's select the hand bone, and I'll switch back to my usual settings, blend to add weight of 1 and strength to a low value. And let's go to frame 10 and start to click in the areas where we lost volume. Be careful not to click too much on the sleeve. We mostly want to restore the volume of the hand itself. Then go to frame 30. Here, enabling wireframe might be a good idea. It will allow me to see better what I'm clicking on. What we are really painting on is the vertices. So just click on a vertex. You can also press Shift H to hide all bones except for the one we are painting on. And then click lightly. I'll undo a bit and reduce the strength even more. I'll try some smoothing, and it seems to work. Okay, let's give it a go. Down looks good. Hand up looks good. So I think we're in good shape. Now to unhide the bones again, I have to go to object mode, select the armature, pose mode, and Alt-H to unhide. For whatever reason, I can hide but not unhide in weight paint mode. So back in weight paint mode, let's try to move the hand freestyle. And it seems quite good in all sorts of poses. So I'll enable the hand and increase the strength, and I'll just paint out most of the weight from the jacket and just leave these weights at the very end. Yeah, this is looking good. Let's call it done. And now we can focus on the head and neck. Let me go to pose mode, select everything, and delete these keyframes. The head and neck will be another tough area. We have the neck disconnecting from the shirt. We also have this collar, which doesn't behave too bad actually. So in advanced rigging, you might add additional bones here to fully automate it. But at this level, we'll just make it into a weight painting exercise and try to make it behave as plausibly as possible with just weight painting. Something I find distracting here are the teeth and eyes. They don't quite follow the head, so let's take care of them. I believe we already fixed something like this in level 2. We could remove all vertex groups here, parent again with empty groups, and assign all vertices of the teeth to the head bone. But we can do it another way. I'll go to edit mode, select one vertex on the teeth, and then press A to select the rest. Then go to item, and let's click on another vertex, and on the vertex weights, make sure that you see DEF head. So I'll set DEF head to 1 here, remove all other vertex groups, then press A to select all vertices, and then press copy. This will copy this setup, which means only assign to DEF head to the rest of the selected vertices. So in edit mode under item is another area where you can tweak vertex groups. So I wanted to show it to you. So now if you click around, all vertices will have a weight of 1 to DEF head. They also have these 0 weights, which are technically fine, but if you want to get rid of them, go to weight paint mode, go to weights, clean, switch to all groups, and a limit of 0 is fine. This means that all 0 weights will be cleaned. You can also increase this value to say 0.001, and that means all weights below this value will be cleaned. Now back to edit mode, I can click around and you'll see that I only have the DEF head vertex group. Let's do the same for the eyes. Select one vertex, A to select all the other ones. Set DEF head to 1. Delete all other vertex groups. Click copy. Go to weight paint mode. Weights. Clean. And now everything should be perfect. I'll press Alt-H. Now the teeth and eyes move with the head bone, but the head itself is not moving with it fully. So let's fix that. I'll go to weight paint mode for the head. I'll check my settings. Blend to add, strength to a low value. Front faces only off. The head should be mostly symmetrical, so you could use symmetry, but I'll disable it because I won't need it. Auto normalize on. And now I'll go to the side view, make my bones see-through, and enable the head vertex group. And now I want to paint from the side view and all the way through to the other side so that I can paint this head in one go. So I'll switch to projected, front faces only is off. So now I can just click and I'll increase the strength and just really quickly assign these vertices to the head bone. For some reason, I have vertex groups for my control bones. Most likely because I parented the character to the rig before we separated the deforming bones. We are going to clean this up in a later video. But now the head geometry will move fully with the head bone. So that's good. However, the head deforms a little bit of the neck, which I don't want. So let's just get rid of these weights and switch fall of shape back to sphere. Because projected can be dangerous, I only use it intentionally in front and side orthographic views. I'll smooth this transition a little bit. I'll see if adding weights for the head bone in this area helps, and it looks good. The head is in good shape now, so let's work on the neck and the connection with the shirt and the body. Currently we have the head as a single object and the body as a different object, but when painting these overlapping meshes, it's better to have them as a single mesh. And that is extremely easy and perfectly non-problematic in Blender. If you have experience with other software, this can make you feel uneasy, but in Blender, you can just select one object, shift select the other, Ctrl J to make this a single mesh, and all weights will just work as before. Right? Absolutely no problem. So now what I actually want to do is focus on the head and shirt. So I'll go to edit mode and press L over the head and then L over the shirt to select these meshes. And now if I go to weight paint mode, I have to enable and disable this toggle. So instead, I could just press P to separate these into a separate object. And then later I can join them back to the body or keep them separate. Again, in Blender, joining and separating meshes is totally fine and not a problem. So now I'll select the rig and the head and shirt, slash to isolate, and go to weight paint mode. Now, I already removed any influence of the head over this area. So now again, similar to the previous parts, I want to simplify this area and I want to make sure that only the head bone and this chest bone are affecting it. Currently the shoulders are affecting it. This chest bone is fine and the head bone we cleaned earlier, so that's also fine. So let's select the shoulders, increase the strength, and paint out all influence. Next, I'll use the same approach we used on the sleeve and hand. So I want to switch blend to mix. And by the way, I can create my own brushes. So with the paintbrush selected, I'll choose duplicate asset. Let's call this mix brush. Press OK. Switch it to mix. And I want to set weight to 0.5 and strength to 1. And now I'll click in this area where the shirt and neck overlap, and I'll try to make it fully green. I'm increasing the strength to a very high value, and that will help me paint faster. Now this should basically fix the disconnecting problem. I'll paint the same 0.5 weights for the chest bone. Now this should look fine, but you can experiment with setting this weight to 0.75 or so and painting this area with this weight. So the neck bone will get a weight of 0.75 here, which means that the chest bone will get 0.25. And I think this is looking good. Now, the neck bone seems to have influence over the jacket. So let's combine these two meshes into a single mesh again and go to weight paint mode. I'll enable the neck bone, enable vertex selection, and press L over the jacket. And then with my paintbrush, I'll increase the strength and just remove influence from this area. And also from the shoulders. The neck shouldn't really affect the shoulders and the back. But the influence of the color I'll leave for now. Now the neck is not influencing the jacket. And we are almost done here. Everything is looking quite nice. We can get occasional intersections here. So with a low strength, I want to paint this area for the chest bone. And possibly a little bit for the shoulder as well. Same on the other side. So this is actually looking nice. If you find that the color is rotating too much with the neck, you can activate the chest and paint some weights on the color vertices. And you can also distribute some of this weight to the shoulder bones. Okay, something like this. Also, there's the shoulders, and it looks like they affect the color too much. So I'll go back and paint more weights for the chest, which will remove weights from the shoulders. And yeah, this is looking better. Some more smoothing. I'll remove some weights lightly, smooth. And yeah, this is starting to work all around. When I rotate the shoulders forward, there is some intersection here, so let's try to fix that. The shoulder does not have any influence over the shirt here, so that's why that happens. So let's just paint lightly for both shoulders and do some smoothing. Distribute the weights and smooth until it's fixed. Let's try to remove all weights from the shoulders from this area. This might just solve it altogether. Yeah, so now we don't have this problem. We just need to smooth the weights here a little bit. And the shoulder is probably affecting too much here, so I'll remove even more weights. I mostly want the shoulder to affect this traps area. Okay, distribute the weights until it looks good, and keep in mind that the shoulder does not have an incredible range of motion. You can raise the shoulders to about this height, and you can move them forward to about this much, probably around 20 to 30 degrees in each direction. Okay, the organic part of the body is starting to look really good. You could certainly spend more time on the very difficult areas, such as the hips and the neck area. The more time you spend, the better results you'll get. We got it to a really good state, almost perfect considering that we are just relying on weights and not so much on automated bones. You can probably squeeze another 10% of quality if you keep painting for another hour or two, but since it is just a repetition of the same process over and over, I'll skip that and move on to the mechanical arm.